So the first thing is to welcome you all to this members event, and I think I really want to emphasise that, and as Suzanne kindly pointed out, we're not in a fancy venue. It's very different this year, of course, for very obvious reasons. But we hope we can have a good session for about an hour, hour and a half, and really looking forward to getting some engagement with you and to talking to you to find out a little bit how things are for you, as well as to tell you where things are at for Community First. So I hope it will be as interesting and as fulfilling as some of our previous events, and it will form part of a series of events. So this won't just be the one-off opportunity and an annual opportunity to find out everything about us, where we're at, what we're doing, and to have that interaction. We do propose to have a series of events over the coming months. We hope we can get back to face-to-face when it's safe to do so, but in the meantime, keep making good use of the online facilities. So for those of you that I'm sure now many people, if not almost everybody, will be familiar with Zoom and the functions on it, but up on the screen at the moment is just a short summary of the key kind of things that you might need. If you've got any problems during the meeting, I think please use the chat facility. So if you can see in your toolbar, and I can see you're all finding that anyway, there's several messages in there. So please do use that to comment, to ask questions, or to introduce yourself. We're not going to be using the hand up function unless at the end we think we can find a way of allowing a bit of time to actually ask questions in person. There'll just be too many people on the call. So welcome. If you've got any questions about using Zoom that's not self-explanatory there, then please do ask in the chat. Just note that we are recording a meeting, so if anybody would prefer not to be recorded in person, you're free to switch your camera off. A lot of the format of the event will be via presentation, so you'll be seeing slides on the screen, and there's ways you can minimize the side of the screen to show the individuals and the speakers and things, so that you can see the full information on the slides. But rest assured, there is an opportunity through the session for you to go into breakout groups and to have some more conversation in person in smaller groups. I appreciate how difficult it can be to be doing it in a big joint room. So welcome again. Rachel, if you could move us on, then we'll make a start. Great. So I really just wanted to use this opportunity, I think, as Community First, to just reflect a little bit on not only what we've been doing during the last 9 to 10 months of COVID response, but really some of the previous achievements, but also to take stock and to look ahead to some of the challenges that we are collectively, I think, going to be facing. And we've deliberately called the session Standing Together, because I think more than ever, this is the time where those of us in the voluntary sector of all organisations, whether you're very small organisations entirely volunteer run, whether you're larger organisations with paid staff and volunteers, in whatever part of the sector, whether you're focused entirely on the health and well-being or whether you're delivering a whole range of service, everybody is playing a role within Community First at the moment. And it's absolutely essential that we do this together and come together to deliver for our beneficiaries. Next slide, please, Rachel. I'm probably going to end up sounding a bit like Patrick Vallance or Chris Whitty by the end of this, as will colleagues who also speak, by saying next slide, but it's just the easiest way of running the presentation and avoiding me trying to do too many things at once. So I wanted to start off just very briefly by summarising some of the actions and the activity that Community First has been doing, really just to set it into context as to how we and some of our member organisations have been able to adapt and adjust during the COVID pandemic. So some of these outputs and actions reflect to the year ending to March of last year, but a lot of them have continued even despite the pandemic. So we've been certainly sort of growing our membership, and obviously our merger in April of 2020. So just as the pandemic was starting to gain traction and put us into something of a a real sort of emergency response, we were in the midst of merging with our colleagues and our friends from Community First New Forest. And I know there's a number of groups from the New Forest on the call this morning, and you're very, very, very welcome. And we're delighted to now have that, have you as part of our overall membership. So the membership's grown. The number of volunteers coming in pre the pandemic in the last year was also growing. We had our new community volunteer first platform. We were launching initiatives like the Walmer Forest Time Bank with external lottery funding. So lots of exciting things happening with volunteering pre the pandemic. And we were supporting an enormous number of groups, and a lot of that was with funding. So again, a really fantastic figure of over £900,000 worth of funding secured for the sector and on behalf of the sector, and support we've been given to specific funding bids. And a huge amount of training. And what was really interesting about the training, even before COVID forced us to move everything online, was that our colleagues in our training team, in Liz and Rachel and Tori and others, had already started to move some of the training onto online functionality, which meant that it was much easier to continue with the support we could offer to groups. So a huge amount going on to enable us to support the voluntary and community sector, and so that it can be the best it can be. Next, please, Rachel. We also, of course, as Community First, deliver a lot of critical community services. And again, I've tried to pick out some that are relevant to the context of the coronavirus pandemic and some of the impacts that we're seeing. So we're continuing to deliver a huge amount of transport work. This is the community transport services, enabling those that can't access public transport or otherwise wouldn't be able to get out and about. So over 150,000 passengers transported a year. We've got a number of services and trips to medical appointments and the car schemes that we run. We're supporting people in their own homes. So the home health service that at the moment we're focusing in Fareham, but is going to be expanded across a number of districts. We're already providing, just in Fareham alone, over 450 hours worth of home health support each week. And these are people that otherwise wouldn't have family, wouldn't have people that can help them in their own homes. And it's keeping people living well and living happily at home, and reducing the burden on the NHS and the health service. We're also promoting a lot of health and wellbeing activities, and one example is the Walking for Health programme. But we're also engaging with young people. So our colleagues in the New Forest, in Marie and the team there, doing some absolutely amazing work with young carers. So we're starting to capture some of those outcomes under the umbrella of Community First. And from the 1st of April of this year, able to provide that vital support. And we've already got around 250 young carers in the New Forest, and it's been so essential to provide them with support through the coronavirus pandemic. Importantly, services like our RASAC, our Rape and Sexual Abuse Counselling Centre and Service, absolutely critical that was able to continue, providing still an extraordinary number of counselling sessions. A lot of it's moved online, but we've still got telephone helpline, which received over 2,000 calls in that year. Some of our community facilities like Lee Park, where we've launched the Park Play and our Heart of the Park initiative, really gaining traction. And it's such a sad situation. I know many of you are involved in running community buildings and community venues, that they are really in limbo at the moment, and really shelving some of those vital community interactions and activities. And we're desperately keen, when we can do so safely, to start reopening some of those. And that's where we can help and support. And then other activities around our mobility hire, Wheels to Work, again, an initiative that our colleagues and friends in the New Forest have been leading on really successfully, helping young people to hire mopeds and to get to work and to get to training opportunities. And really importantly, our continuation of the lottery-funded Positive Pathways programme. This is support for vulnerable people, people with mental health conditions, people who just need that extra support to get into volunteering, maybe get into training, and to rebuild their lives. And we've been supporting a good number of people in that way. Next slide, please, Rachel. So the voluntary sector during COVID then, and this is just a real sort of snapshot. I could have filled slide after slide with all the fantastic images of some of our member organisations and our partners, and indeed our own volunteers. And it's often been described to me, and it's a phrase that I know I've used often as well during the last sort of 9 months, that best describes the sector as messy and magnificent. And that's, I think it really sort of sums us up in many respects. And I don't make any apologies for using the word messy, because the voluntary sector is sometimes at its best when it's left to get on with things. When people are empowered, they take the initiative and they just get on and do what needs doing in their sectors. It doesn't mean that they negate the issues around safety. So we were able to step in and help coordinate some of those wonderful mutual aid groups that stepped up, making sure they could do things safely, could do things effectively, making sure that the coordination was there so that we didn't have overlapping groups, everybody doing the same thing in the same place, without huge gaps appearing in some of our more deprived and needy neighbourhoods. We mobilised a huge number of our own volunteers. We worked with groups with disabilities. We helped with food banks and made sure that they had the supplies that they needed. We helped with assisted shopping services. We mobilised a huge army of advanced motorcyclists from a Hampshire and Solent Advanced Motorcyclist Club that did amazing work around prescription deliveries and collections, morning, noon and night. Again, our Young Carers programme in the New Forest created some fantastic activity packs. We had Zoom calls. Our members just did all sorts of brilliant and wonderful things. And it was truly inspiring and heartwarming to see that level of activity taking place. We know it was in crisis. We know that it was at a time when people were desperately needy and needed urgent assistance. But it just showed the willingness and the appetite and the ability of this sector to step up and respond. And I have to say that I think from my own involvement at the strategic level, working with our colleagues in Hampshire County Council, with our local district colleagues and with our NHS colleagues, the response, that I think they were amazed at the response. They're enormously grateful for the response, as am I, for the fact that groups just dropped everything and turned their attention to responding in the way that they did. And we've got some fantastic examples. And as I say, there'll be many more that I know around this room that you will be have been involved in and will be able to share. And one of the things we want to do going forward is to capture some of those stories. It's really, really important that we show what the sector has achieved, what we can achieve, and what we want to achieve going forward. So messy and magnificent to start with, but with the coordination, the leadership, that means that going forward, we can provide a much better service and a really effective support for those that are going to need it. And sadly, there'll be a number of people in our communities that will need that. Next slide, please, Rachel. So then our COVID response. Again, just a few statistics, but I know many around this room will have similar and the same. We were embedded with the local response centres with our district local authorities. This is where people who needed support could phone the Hampshire helpline, get referred to their local response centre in their district, who in turn would refer into Community First and the wider voluntary community and social enterprise sector for support. We supported over 1,200 vulnerable residents ourselves, and over 1,100 volunteers were recruited and mobilised. And that's a real kind of significant upsurge and something that we're keen to continue. We secured lottery money to employ wellbeing workers in 3 of the most needy areas across Havant, Fareham and the New Forest. We're able to continue with those wellbeing workers for a little bit longer yet. And really providing a lot of that advice, guidance and support, not stopping mutual aid and community helpers doing what they wanted to do and could do to help. We needed everybody, but just doing it in a joined up and as coordinated way as we possibly could. So as I say, a real sort of snapshot of an example of how Community First as a council of voluntary service was able to operate both as a provider of support, but also as an enabler and facilitator, and importantly, coordinator, and that bridge between local authorities doing the wonderful work that our councils were able to do, and of course, our colleagues in the NHS. Next slide, please, Rachel. So just to reflect then on some of the challenges that we're finding, and I hope some of these will resonate with you and hope will stimulate some of the conversation we're just about to have in the breakout groups. It's very clear that the voluntary sector and the charity sector has never been more needed. and in fact, it's a trending hashtag, never more needed. And it's really given us an opportunity to, celebrate all of the fantastic work that the sector has been doing, beavering away behind the scenes. And it's only sometimes when you have these situations that we've faced. Clearly, we've never had a pandemic before that we've had to do what we've done in the last 9 or 10 months. But it's only at times of crisis sometimes that some of our organisations are able to kind of get into the limelight and really be shown for what they are. But I think it's important to recognise that the hard part is possibly yet to come. And I don't mean to sort of scaremonger in saying that. But at a time when we've never been more needed, we know that many organisations have experienced sort of significant challenges in trying to reconcile the spiralling demand for your services with that reduction in income. For those of you that have had to close services, have had to, either lay off staff or not ask volunteers not to come in, it is a really challenging time. What I would say is that I'm just blown away by the number of organisations that it was very tempting, I think, for some charities to just say, well, we've got government support, we can go into furlough, sit tight, wait it out, and we'll come back again in a few months' time. But of course, as charities and voluntary sector, we're here to help. Our raison d'etre is to roll our sleeves up and get stuck in. So even at significant financial cost, and probably at a significant cost to staff and volunteers in our organisations and your own organisations, I'm sure, in terms of mental health and stress and strain, got stuck in. And that was truly inspiring, not just for ourselves in the sector, but for those outside the sector to see what could be done. So the motivation clearly was there. As Rita Chada, the chair of the Small Charity Coalition, said, the motivation is there, but the ability and capacity to actually do work at a time of great strain was very limited. What it has highlighted, of course, is really the COVID pandemic has shone a spotlight still on the fragility and the loneliness that exists in our communities. And so we found so many people who had very fragile social networks, limited family connections, that needed and would rely on the friendship and kindness and help of strangers and volunteers to provide the very basic necessities of food and medicines during the pandemic. And that's something that for me personally, it really brought it home to me, just the extent of the number of people that very, very quickly, when shielding and other isolations came into place, needed that support. And coupled with the fact that we're all not necessarily sitting comfortably, although I'm sure a few of you are perhaps still in your PJs. I'm certainly still in my slippers, and I can't recall delivering an AGM or too much in the way of formal meetings at Community First sitting in my slippers. It's just that the fact that we can sit on the Zoom calls, we can sit online, we can interact, we've relied solely on being able to have that technology. So many people can't, either because they're not able to or because they can't afford to. And that digital divide has meant that, if anything, there are more people who are likely to be left behind. I hope that some of you will have interacted, or some of you will have seen and had a chance to comment on and taken into account some of the proposals that have been talked around in government. And last September, Danny Kruger, the MP, produced his report on levelling up and the proposals for a new social covenant that comes up with a number of quite interesting, some challenging, and some, I think, quite exciting and inspiring opportunities to empower people and communities to build on the mutual aid response that we saw through the pandemic. And also challenging for Community First as a council of voluntary service, for us to be more modern, to modernise, to nurture, to lead the sector. But one of the things he said in the report was the process you use to get to the future is the future you get. And I think it was a long-standing edict that he heard several times in his consultation when he was collating information to produce the report for his government, to see what they could do to harness some of that community enthusiasm. And I think the message for me in that is that we've got an opportunity to influence the future, and we need to have our voices heard. We need to, those of us from existing organisations, alongside those that have formed organisations during the pandemic, we need to inform that future. We need to harness some of that community power and be responsible and take the leadership and responsibility to say that we can continue to support, we want to continue to support, and we want to continue to inspire and motivate and work with volunteers. So some really interesting ideas coming out of that. And I very much hope that one of our future sessions will be able to get Danny Kruger along to perhaps speak with us and speak with a group of our members to talk to us. Next slide, please, Rachel. Thank you. And alongside never been more needed, we've never been more noticed. So the sector's stock has never been higher. We need to really build on that. We must do more. And I say this, I think, probably every AGM and every annual event and in between as well. We as Community First certainly need to do more. And I'd encourage you as our member organisations to do more to demonstrate our role and impact. There's some fantastic opportunities at the moment to celebrate, and certainly we're going to be, calling on you as our members to give us some good news stories, to really reflect back with our partner organisations some of the great things that we've achieved. The partnerships and relationships that have been forged through adversity, when needs must. It's amazing how many barriers have been broken down, how many. I do apologise, that's probably me saying that I should stop talking and hand over to the breakout group. So I'll wrap up in 2 seconds. But the partnerships and relationships that have been forged through adversity and just having to do things differently, those will remain. There's some amazing kind of opportunities there, organisations that previously have been a little bit distant for us, finding hard to get into. They don't understand us, we don't understand them. We've really broken down a number of those barriers, and we've got some really, really fantastic opportunities. And I'm really keen to bring some of you with us in exploring those. And we will need you as our members. These aren't all about opportunities for Community First, they're opportunities for yourselves and our member organisations. So a lot of you will be already tackling some of the growing societal problems we're facing. Obviously this week there's been a lot of debate now about the health inequalities that exist and prevail in this country, and that's going to be something that the sector is going to need to tackle. The debt, unemployment, sheer volume of people experiencing mental health, the utmost admiration for our colleagues in Mind organisations and other mental health charities, the work that our colleagues and friends in Citizens Advice are doing around debt and unemployment to try and keep people safe and as well as they can be through this crisis period. And the organisations that were doing amazing work with young people and outreach and engagement work, I really feel for our COVID generation, as they're now being called, that will have lived through this in their teenage years, that will have impacted not just their education, but their whole kind of social upbringing. I know young people are incredibly tough and resilient, but they are because we're able to give them that support, and those organisations are able to give them that support. And it's our ability to reach into some of those communities that is our biggest asset, and that's where government, local authorities and others are really going to need us. I would really encourage, and something I want to tease out through this morning's session is, the sharing of resources, the sharing of ideas. We've seen some amazing collaboration in our sector, and I know it's not always been easy. I know at times some organisations and some of our members say to me that you feel, are we competing? Are we collaborating, not with Community First necessarily, but with each other? Are there organisations doing the same thing on the same patch, and how can we define ourselves? But there's been amazing willingness to collaborate and join up, and I really want to continue to nurture some of that. One of the ways we might look at that is through our community enterprise hubs. So looking at a new way of operating community buildings and premises, looking at spaces where when we can come together, that we do come together, and what sort of services we can offer both digitally but also in person, and how we can collaborate to share the cost and the burden of running those. We want to make volunteering easy and accessible. We changed our Volunteer First platform during the pandemic. We've created the Get Volunteering Hampshire-wide platform to make it easy for people to get into volunteering without going through layers of bureaucracy. And in Danny Kruger's report was the suggestion and recommendation around volunteer passports to make it easy for volunteers to move between organisations and to do different roles. And one of the roles we know is particularly challenging at the moment is around recruiting and retaining trustees. One of the things I'd encourage all organisations to do, and we're offering to help organisations to do, is to make plans. So we know that these plans will have to change, but make a plan and is better than no plan at all and saying it's too early, it's too difficult, even if it's a short plan, even if it's quite restricted in terms of what you're confident in able to do. And do ask for help. There's plenty of help out there, and be ready to ask for funding. I know, again, a number of organisations have said to me of late, we can get some COVID funding, but what we need is funding for core costs to be able to move forward and stabilise our organisation and be ready for recovery. We know that, we hear that, we're pushing funders hard on that, and we're trying to access funding. A number of funders are starting to open the doors to new funding opportunities, and we're mindful that when lockdown does ease, that floodgates may open and there'll be huge competition. So get ahead of the game, be ready, and work with our colleagues to access that funding. Next slide, please, Rachel. Okay, so that's just by way of sort of scene setting, a reflection of some of those challenges. I hope that's whetted your appetite, and I'm sure you're chomping at the bit to ask a number of questions, and a number will be already appearing in the chat. And you're already sharing ideas and links and opportunities. I want to now move into some breakout groups, and I'm going to stop talking myself, and I invite Rachel Dalbakin, Learning and Training Coordinator, just to explain some of the logistics around it. But please rest assured, you don't have to do anything. Everything will be automated for you in terms of moving into the breakout group and moving back into the main plenary session straight afterwards. We can give about 25 minutes for this session, so it should be time for you to make some comments. We're not going to do feedback at the end, but we are going to record the notes. You'll have a facilitator who can do that. And sorry, Rachel, I'm stealing your thunder, so please, you explain how it's going to work. Over to you. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. So just as Tim said, you've got 25 minutes. You will be put automatically into a breakout room. You will have a facilitator from Community First in each of your rooms, which are ready to go. So the facilitator will record all of your notes and your questions separately. So everything will be recorded for you. So just try and participate in the discussion. And you will be you'll be given 2 minutes notice when you'll come back into the main room, which will flag up on your screens. So that's just a note for the facilitators to wrap it up and join the main room within 2 minutes. So I'll put you all through in just a second. And yeah, 25 minutes from now, which is about 1:45, I think.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Sorry about the slight interruption to that discussion, but I'm pleased that you were able to have a few more minutes to conclude some of your discussions. And I know breakout rooms are never long enough. There's always more to be said. And just when you think, oh, that's a really interesting thing I'd like to react to, you see the dreaded countdown telling you you're going back into the main session. But thank you to my colleagues who facilitated those, and thank you to those who participated and contributed. I dipped in and out of about 4 of the groups, and really, really interesting topics of discussion, and really, really useful. So I'll just reflect just very briefly in a second. Rachel, are we all back now?
Coming back now. I think that's about it now.
Okay, great. Okay then. So just want to spend a very few minutes just before we move into the AGM part of the this morning's session, just to reflect on that discussion. I think there's some really interesting points made in the groups that I was able to participate in. I mean, a couple of things around a desire to see more collaboration, more joining up between members and organisations, dovetailing services, providing referral mechanisms. Some really good discussion about needing to work with marginalised and potentially excluded groups. And I know Andy's joined us, and you know, in terms of representation from transgender communities. So whilst we think that our society has become a kinder and friendlier place during the pandemic with the desire to help people, there are still those that sadly don't welcome the diversity and the inclusion that a lot of us desperately desire to see. And social media and digital interaction means that you're exposed to a lot of hatred still, to a lot of vitriol online, and to things that can cause tremendous harm and hurt. And we need collectively as a sector to do more to tackle that, and to reflect and of course increase in our own diversity, because in parallel with the pandemic, we've seen of course the movement around Black Lives Matter, but I think that's been a window into the wider agendas around diversity, and certainly Community First isn't shying away from that. We know we've got a long way to go and more that we can do. And I'd actually welcome dialogue with member groups that represent different parts of our communities, and some of those marginalised groups to help us to see what more we can do to help you and to improve ourselves. We also heard about sort of access to services and being the bridge and the gap, and that's where I just want to reflect on a few thoughts now for our membership and insight and engagement events. So we are sort of breathing new life into our membership. Many of you have been members for a long time. There's some new things we want to offer, and of course we always want you to tell us what you want and need. Next slide, Rachel, please. So membership definitely matters at a time we need each other more than ever. We need to be part of a movement, and Community First wants to be at the forefront of leading that movement. We want our services to be digital first so that you can access the advice and information when you want it, how you want it. But that does not mean that we're going to be solely digital. We will still be there in person. I can't wait for the days when we can have more events in person, sitting around tables, sitting around rooms, meeting in coffee shops, chatting through ideas and opportunities, and offering that very bespoke advice on a one-to-one basis for your own organisation or for groups of organisations. We can offer a range of member discounts on services and support, and throughout the years we're going to be offering some special offers. We are, though, going to start introducing a very small membership charge for our membership, which will cost £10 a year. We know that for some of you as members, you paid that when you were members of Community First New Forest, and that will continue across the wider Community First platform. But some of those there highlight the things that we can offer. I've heard again this morning the need for Community First to continue to be the voice, be the influence that happens. I've heard that we want to collaborate, so we want to launch a series of events and networks and forums. We already run a number. Many of you are involved in some of our health and wellbeing forums. Some of you are involved in the really important Hampshire and Isle of Wight social prescribing network that's been running really successfully. We want to certainly help you to get volunteers, and we're going to continue with our business Skillshare programme of bringing in business expertise to assist organisations. And we can offer a range of services around health and safety advice, DBS checks, payroll, bookkeeping, and of course, when we're able to reopen buildings. So advice on running buildings, but also having spaces to hire. So membership is really important. We think we can offer a really wide suite of offers and opportunities, but please do tell us what you want. If there's something that you really want and need, it's not obviously there on our membership, tell us so that we can look at how we can best provide it. Next slide, Rachel, please. And just to say, one of the things I really want to do, as I said at the outset, this is part of a series of meetings and events. So we're going to launch a series of insight and engagement events for our members, helping us to have that voice. And our plan at the moment is for these to be thematically based. So we're going to start, and I think one of the first ones we might want to do is around social action. So nurturing some of that grassroots community activity enabling us that we saw through the pandemic. How can we continue that? We also want to look at sectors around health and wellbeing, and I want to have a major engagement opportunity with colleagues in the NHS and the CCG colleagues who themselves are coming together as a single clinical commissioning group from April around the new integrated care system and model that's going to be operating in Hampshire and across the Isle of Wight. So what is the role of the voluntary sector in that? We're going to need to come together to look at economic challenges around employment, around debt, working with our friends and colleagues in the Citizens Advice and elsewhere. And a couple of you, I know Paul from Homestart and Chris from It's Your Choice are on the call this morning, mentioned about working with engagement through organisations, working with families and young people. And how can we come together to collaborate rather than seeing organisations duplicate? And there's a lot of opportunities there, either in specific geographic areas or across our patch. In addition, we want to run more expert sort of masterclasses, things like marketing, business planning. We're all going to need to look at our plans, revise our financial forecasts, look at new ways of generating income for our important services and new ways of measuring and demonstrating our impact. So how can we draw on business expertise, learn from each other, bring in specialist trainers when we need to help us do that? And all of that will be part of your membership offer. I want to bring in some high profile speakers. I'll be asking some of you as members for thoughts and ideas on what you want to see. But I want Community First to be the platform for raising these issues, debating these issues, and having a really challenging agenda for our members going forward. So that is our plan, and you can look out for the first events happening from the get-go for March. We're not going to sit on our hands on this. We'll do it digitally where we need to start with, and then broaden it out when we can have some face-to-face events. Thank you, Rachel. Next slide, please. So other things that we're just doing very briefly is around our website, relaunch coming soon, and a lot of our membership services, membership pages will be on there. We've revamped our Volunteer First, and we've launched our Area Connects pages. And this is the new model of giving you all the information you need, particularly around the coronavirus pandemic and the support that you can get depending on where you operate. You can go onto those Connects pages to give you it at a glance, and those we will build on to support voluntary organisations going forward. And I think that next slide, please, Rachel, because I think now that brings us on to just the final part of this morning, a short and brief AGM. And I'm going to hand over to our chairman, Beverly Jones, to lead this. There will at the end of it be a polling opportunity so that you can affirm your decisions, and that will be the way that we'll capture the votes on it, on the issues that we need to do through the AGM. So can I introduce Beverly Jones, Chairman of Community First, to lead us through this next session. Bev, over to you.
Thank you, Tim. Welcome to this part of the meeting, the AGM, and welcome to my virtual desert island as well. We have apologies, and we will note those in the minutes. We won't go through them now. As Tim has explained, some of the items on our agenda we'll be voting on at the end of the meeting. The minutes of the last meeting, which were held on the 24th of January at the cricket ground, it was a very pleasant day, and obviously we weren't virtual. And those minutes have been circulated, and you'll be able to vote in a moment to say whether that's a true reflection of that meeting. My report has been again circulated. You will have an opportunity to look at it. But maybe just a few highlights. Next slide, please. Next one, perhaps. And the next one. Next one. And the next one. Here we are. Okay, obviously at the end of the financial year we're talking about, we had the unwelcome arrival of COVID, which obviously upset financially our finances and obviously caused a great deal of us constraints. And it's been with us obviously for the last 12 months, and that will obviously have been a testing time for all voluntary groups. I think too, in thinking back on the COVID situation, to how true our strapline is about managing centrally and delivering locally. It's been good to get our thoughts together, our strategy to how to cope with the pandemic, and also then to make sure that we deliver things locally. I think as an organization, we've responded very well to continuous change. A major milestone in our development, of course, was the joining with Community First New Forest. It was about joining, it wasn't about takeovers, it was a true merger of interests. And I think we're both learning from each other. And of course, the great advantage, of course, is that we didn't have to change our name. We now find ourselves now covering 50% of Hampshire, whether you work that out on people or on green fields. It's been a time too for reviewing and strengthening our enterprise portfolio. You'll hear in a moment, we've invested in that, in our enterprises. The idea too being that our enterprises provide us with surplus funds that we can invest back into the organization. We haven't just thought about ourselves, though, we have really thought about other people, and you can see that figure there, which is nearly approaching £1 million that we've helped bring into the area for use by other people. And we continue to lead what is known as the CVS network in Hampshire. Next slide, please. Just some thanks and support to various people. I won't go through the councils which support us, but without their support, we'd be in a difficult place. I'm unsure about the graphics in this slide as to what the hands do, but it may be of interest. Perhaps a special thank you to Hampshire County Council, who, because we lead the CVS network, has seen us as a true partner rather than just someone they give a grant to. And for that, we thank them. And we're not always in the south of the county, the middle of the county. We do move up, and we thank Basingstoke for their support of transport, and also over into West Sussex for Chichester for their support of shop mobility. And it's obviously various companies who support us, perhaps not with financial help, but more on the skills side. What skills can they help us with to help other people? Next slide, please. Can I thank my board? We're not large in number, but we do an awful lot of work. This is not about just turning up for 4 meetings a year or something like that. And these people are volunteers. And what we do is to steer and develop Community First, to ensure it thrives, that it has a future, that it may look different. We're not preserving it in aspic or anything like that. We do want it to move forward. And we want a can-do attitude, and to give that feeling to other people too, that you can approach us and we'll come up with new ideas, and those new ideas then can create new services, which sometimes means giving up some work or enterprise. And our purposes are linked at the bottom of the page in terms of improving the well-being and health of communities we serve. We want to be a credible and preferred partner. We don't want to be difficult. We want to work with people. And we obviously, as I've mentioned before, want to generate income and surplus from our enterprises. Want to be a bit more commercial in the way we approach things. And we also want people to come together with us. We think there is merit in working with other people. Could I just say too, it was sad that one of our board, Colonel Bill Stevens, who died during the last year, a military man, short in words, and especially didn't like long things. He was never impressed with my writing a novel on a certain subject. If Bill couldn't get it into a couple of lines, it wasn't worth doing. And we will miss Bill Stevens. Next slide, please. Can I thank our staff and volunteers for their loyalty, for their courage, especially in the month of March and in the last year. It's been hard work, and it's been doing things differently. When I worked, it would be to have a day at home and to work from home was wonderful. It isn't wonderful sometimes. It does bring difficulties with it, and our staff have coped very well with that. Can I thank our chief executive, our pilot? I use that expression because for the last 12 months or so, during March, last 12 months, I see Tim wearing the headset that he's wearing today, usually in a white shirt, and he does look like the pilot. Sometimes it looks as though he's been flying the plane for 12 hours. He looks a bit tired, he looks exasperated, he looks challenged, he looks tired, but he's guided our plane well. He's kept to the route. He's landed us safely and on time, and has managed his crew well, and always seems to be ready for the next day. I often think, I wonder which airline Tim would be with. Sometimes he does look like a senior captain of British Airways. And then sometimes I think, no, he looks a little more like Virgin. And there are times when I think he does look like Jet2 or Ryanair. Challenging times ahead for us all. Would like to pay give thanks to our members for your support. It is going to be challenging times ahead. We expect difficulties, money is going to be tight, and we need to be prepared. It may be possibly a different world when COVID finally leaves us. Perhaps time to rethink, and we have been rethinking over the last year, our strategy and ways forward. That is my report, and I thank you for listening. Can we now move on to the next item, which is, I think, the one that you're going to deal with, Tim, the directors who are retiring. Item 4.
Yes, next slide, please, Rachel. So, and the next slide, please. So, as we have every year, we require a third of our board, or a minimum of 3 directors, to stand down and to stand for re-election. And the retiring directors by rotation this year are John Evans, Jenny Owens, and Dennis Gibson. All 3 are standing for reappointment. And in addition, this year, after our merger with Community First New Forest from the 1st of April of 2020, we co-opted David Ely and Paul Kirkland, who were previous trustees of Community First New Forest, to join the board of Community First. And they are standing for, as being co-opted during the year, to be formally appointed onto the board of Community First. We're going to take the vote at the very end of the AGM, so that's really just for information at this stage, and you'll be invited as members to approve those appointments of those 5 directors. Next slide, please, Rachel.
Can we move on then to just to look at our finances, and I'd like to call upon our Vice Chair to talk us through a number of slides about our finances. Trevor Lewis.
Right, I'm unmuted. Good afternoon, everyone. I think I was going to put this up as the second slide because I was going to get all the excuses in on the first slide. 2019-20, as Bev and Tim said, was a very successful year. We settled in people from Fareham. We negotiated the merger with the New Forest. And as Bev just said, we started to invest significantly in developing our enterprise strategy. It's probably worth saying that when we put our budgets together, our objective always is to spend whatever revenue we get to support people in need. And consequently, our budgets tend to look like a break-even budget, except for where we choose to invest some money in developing the organization. And if we look at the income and expenditure report for 2019-20, you'll see that, in fact, our revenue dropped by 362,000. Well, it didn't really. What happened was that in the previous year, we had 334,000 transferred into our assets from Fareham in 2018-19. And clearly that doesn't happen every year. So if we strip that out, then basically our operational revenue dropped by £28,000, which gave us a loss of £122,000 in 2019-20 as opposed to 26 in 2018-19. The reasons for that are on the next slide. So if you could give me the next slide, Rachel. As I say, we've always got planned investments that we choose to make. So in this year, it was in fact £42,000, there's a mistake on that slide, apologies for that, where we recruited Harold Small, who's joined us as Director of Enterprise, and he spent some months with us in 2019-20, and the results of his efforts now coming to fruition in 2020-21. Also, we had increased professional fees associated with the mergers and various other activities. And also our pension contributions, of which more and none, increased by about £5,000 because of the change percentage we had to pay on the new government statutory scheme. So that accounted for 42,000. Unplanned or surprises, as we like to call them, we've got an investment of about £120,000 in St James's Place, which in 1819 generated £4,000 surplus, but this year it generated £12,000 loss, which I found quite surprising, really. But nevertheless, it was a 12,000 loss. We had a turnaround there of £16,000. We had losses on over 90 projects of £13,000, and that consisted of some gains, some losses, but 13,000 overall. Plus, we'd hoped to rent out some space in Fareham, and we didn't achieve that as much as we would have liked, which meant a loss of 11,000. So the unplanned losses came to 40. And then, of course, we had the big shock loss as opposed to a surprise, with COVID coming along at the back end of the year. And what we started to notice in February, March was that numbers of our members were getting a bit tense about funding. And for the first time, we thought it would be prudent if we made a bad debt provision for the year, just in case there were problems during COVID. And what's happened during this last year is that of that 30,000 debt provision, we've definitely identified 18,000 that we'll have to write off. And we're still hopeful about the other 12, but members are under quite a lot of pressure. The other thing is that we do get a lot of money from fair income on transport. And even with just the short lockdown we had in March, it cost us £10,000. So if we look at what the real operational losses were, then basically it's the 90 plus projects generating a 13,000 loss and space rental being 11. So at 24,000, it was more or less in line with the previous year. Can I have the next slide, Rachel? When we look at the balance sheet, it always looks a bit like World War III. The objective, as I say, is that we plan to break even. So what makes the biggest impact on our net assets at the end of the year is always the valuation of the HCC pension fund, where in the past we've had significant numbers of members. So in terms of our cash, our net assets, which includes cash and debtors, that dropped by £46,000 because of the reasons I've just been through. Our net assets, which includes fixed assets as well, that dropped by 111,000 because there was quite a bit of fixed asset depreciation that we took into the accounts. And then we've got the HCC pension liability, which increased through the actuarial valuation by £115,000, which has pushed us into negative net assets. Now, there's a big story around that. The actuaries have got in place a plan to return the pension liabilities to fully funded over a 25-year period. And that therefore varies from year to year. The previous year, it had given us a positive contribution. So we've got that happening. The way they're returning it to fully funded is by having an increased pension contribution from year to year on current members, plus a supplementary contribution that we have to make. And in 1920, it was £38,000, which is a significant amount of money. The good news is that from 2020-21 onwards, they're dropping the additional contribution and just focusing on the percentage contribution made by us on behalf of current members. So this year we'll be £38,000 better off in terms of pension contribution, which would be a big help. The other point to mention is that of that 840,000, we had about $500,000 underwritten by Winchester City Council. And this year we've got that $500,000 plus 166,000 underwritten by Fareham. So if Community First were ever unable to meet its liabilities, we've got guarantees on nearly 700,000 of the 955. Plus, Hampshire's introduced a new way of investing the monies that charities have got in the HCC pension scheme, which will see more money invested in equities, which should get a better return. So in fact, the total liability, were it to be called in, currently that 955 would probably look more like about 355,000, all of which would be guaranteed by the local authorities. So it's not as bad as it looks, but it doesn't look like a comfortable number if someone looks at our accounts. So next slide, Rachel. Well, before we talk about the appointment of the auditor, the only thing I wanted to say was that, as Bev has congratulated Tim and the team of staff and volunteers have done a fantastic job during COVID. And what we'll find when we look at next year's accounts is that not only have we increased turnover to more than 3 million because of the merger with Community First, New Forest, but in that, we've also got some organic growth with the turnover going up to over £3 million. So this year, despite everything, looks as if it's been quite successful. Right, I think the accounts will be adopted at the end, so nothing more for me to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Trevor. Item 6 is a very quick item in terms of we need to propose an auditor. And we propose, and you can vote on this at the moment, that Maurice Crocker continue as our auditor, and you leave it to the board to consider an appropriate remuneration for that company. And I think that takes us then to the end of the AGM, but we can now move on to voting on several items, which were the minutes of last year's meeting, the annual accounts, which Trevor has talked about, the appointment of the auditor, and the change of some directors. And Rachel, am I right in saying when we can all do that now?
Yeah, that's right. I'm just launching it now.
Thank you. And now you can see it. You either agree or you disagree. Always wanted to say this, and vote now. And when you've made your votes, if you press submit, Rachel will go into a darkened room and start counting. Okay. Is that okay? I think that brings us to the end of the AGM. I think we've done it on time, but the last question was, I think, Tim, any questions that we can take in terms of 5 minutes? And Tim, myself, probably Trevor will be available afterwards, still online, if you wish to continue those questions. But we don't want to keep everyone together just to hear others. But if there are a number, I think we've got about 3 or 4 minutes before 12:30, we can take any questions.
Thank you, Bev. Yes. Rachel, could you move us on a slide or two, just in case there are a couple of things just to wrap up at the end, but I think it's just reflections. So thank you, Bev. Yeah, we're keeping an eye on the chat. And really, yeah, just by way of sort of reflections, really, I hope you found it useful. I appreciate being an online call. We've naturally had to condense it into a much shorter time frame, and we don't have the luxury of being able to gather over lunch or some sandwiches and continue our conversation. So as Beverly says, I'm very happy to stay on for a time after the official end of proceedings this morning. And if anybody would like to converse and just share some further thoughts, any ideas and suggestions or comments you'd like to make, then I'd be happy to continue the dialogue. And by all means, grab a cup of coffee or tea or bite to eat as well, and certainly can stay on for sort of 15 or 20 minutes or so if people would like that. But thank you very much for coming. Can we just move on a little bit further, Rachel? I think there's just to the end slides. So thanks obviously to, as Beverly said during the AGM, to our local authority partners, but also the many other funders and partner organisations that have helped us over the years, and many now long-standing partners, and long may some of those relationships continue. And I'm delighted that we're welcoming obviously our new partners and funders from the New Forest, and we're looking to grow that list and including many more logos and representative organisations. But a huge thanks, and can I just echo my own thanks to my staff team and our volunteers who have actually done an amazing job, not only in the last 10 months, but before that as well. But the last few months, as for all our member organisations, I know has been extraordinarily difficult and challenging. and without fail, colleagues in the Community First team I know have offered not only their support to each other, but the support to our member organisations as well, and it's very much appreciated. Next slide, please, Rachel. And a reminder that it is okay not to be okay, and there will be times when all of us, and myself, and I include myself in that, and as Beverly did rather gently suggest from time to times with the airline analogy, that where we don't feel okay, we perhaps don't even look our best, and that is okay, and everybody's accepting of that. It is extraordinarily difficult, but there's so many resources out there, and if any organisations would like any signposting to resources, then it's all available on our website, and we're available to talk about the specific things that you need for your staff or for your volunteers. Nobody is getting through this completely unscathed. It's not water off a duck's back. It's tough times for everybody, but there's a lot of help out there and a lot of opportunity to help each other and look out for each other. And I'm just so grateful that organisations have looked out for each other. We've had tremendous support, and perhaps a big thank you to Jewel Heller-Dixon from the Carroll Centre and for her team. So one of our organisations in Winchester that have actually turned tables and have helped Community First through this with some of their expertise and insight into looking after colleagues' mental health and well-being. So a huge thank you to them. So do make use of that. And this little graphic was drawn by Emma at Imagistic, and Emma, some of you will have known, has supported a number of Community First events in the past, and she published this early on in the first phases of lockdown, and you know, it's been useful ever since, really, just a reminder. And next slide, please, Rachel. And that's it, really. So thank you very much indeed for joining us. I hope you found it useful to hear some reflections on how we are dealing with the pandemic and how we want to work with you. And I hope you found the information about membership useful. We certainly look forward to signing you all up and in fact growing our membership further. And we look forward to announcing details of those up and coming series of thematic events and group workshops where we can come together and continue some of these conversations. So I'll just pause for a while to let anybody that would like to dip off. If you've got any questions, would anybody like to ask any questions before we do finish? If there are any questions in the chat, I know 2 or 3 of my colleagues were keeping an eye on the chat to see if there were any questions. We probably, as numbers start to drop off, there may be an opportunity to keep an eye out for hands up if anybody would like to ask anything. Can I ask Mandy or Hal or Liz, who were my colleagues looking out for the chat, if there were anything that you'd like to just bring to my attention? But I'll have a look myself. Okay. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.